Hi, Donna.
Hi, Al.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
I'm doing pretty good. And what were we going to talk about today?
Well, as a matter of fact, we were going to talk about memory.
That's right. I remember now. Yeah, we're going to talk about memory. Cool.
That sort of thing actually happens to all of us. We're all poised and ready to speak, and then somehow what we're about to say flies out. And then we often remember by coming at it in a roundabout way, and then the original thought or word pops up.
That's right. It's just like, we've all done this too. We've left the room to go to another room to get something. And you're in there and you're like, what the heck was I here for? So you go back to the other room and it's like an association with that you wanted. You go, yeah, that's it. So you go back to the other room and do what you wanted to do. It's a funny thing like that.
And sometimes people think, oh my gosh, I'm doomed. I've got Alzheimer's or, the onset of dementia. And then when you start looking closely, you see that you're very distracted. Yeah. And that something else just, occupies your mind, and that you did forget, but it's not about having dementia. It's that we're actually not focused and our mind wanders and jumps from here to there. And I think that's reassuring sometimes to see that.
Oh, sure. I mean, how many times have you sat down to check your email and before you know it, you're going down the rabbit hole of some article you came across or something on the web or something like that. I mean, that happens to me a lot. I go to my computer and I'm start on one thing and I totally get directed in another way. And then eventually I'll circle back to getting to the email. Yeah, our attention is very malleable in a way. We can have it swept away from us, or we can direct it in certain ways if we want to form an intention to use it and create a certain kind of experience for ourselves. And that certainly pertains to memory as well.
It pertains to memory and daily moment-to-moment experience. And we have everything to do with the quality of our existence by harnessing our attention.
Yeah.
We can feel good. We can remember the happy times. We can actually remember difficult times. And we get to choose. Now, some people don't think they're choosing. I've had lots of discussion like this. And it does take some discipline. It takes some prompting, internal prompting. So when I think about my childhood, for example, there were moments of great difficulty and there were moments that were fantastic and phenomenal. And I've chosen to filter through my childhood and pick out the good stuff, and remembering horseback riding with my dad, for example. Whole family went camping and fishing. It was really a lot of fun. Now, for example, my parents were really worried about money a fair amount of the time. So they would talk about money and worry about it and spending and sometimes argue about it. But they always then got in the car, packed everything up, and we would go to the high Sierras from Los Angeles and have fabulous times trout fishing. And so it didn't prevent us from going on family outings. We just controlled our spending.
Yeah. You're talking and I'm remembering a process I've been doing with myself for a while now. I realized probably 6-8 months ago that a lot of my memories I experienced myself as just being alone and not being connected with other people. And so I started intentionally going through my memories, especially early as I could remember up through teens, and remembering all the people that I knew. So I go through and I just remember all the different relationships, the different friendships that I had. And it's changing the way I remember myself. So I look back at that period of time and I don't see myself alone anymore. I see myself with friends. So there's really all kinds of interesting ways we can use our attention to reorganize our memories, to reintegrate them and change them in a way that really is more positive and more satisfying for us.
Yeah, the way that you're describing the use of memory, like you said, it changes how you feel about yourself. We call that in the Feldenkrais method your self-image. It's like, you're not alone, or you weren't alone. Maybe you did enjoy being alone sometimes, but in fact, you had a lot of relationships with people. And then you start to develop this new self-image that says, I'm very likable. I'm a friendly guy.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to find all those friends back there, and very cool, very positive, self-assuring kind of experience to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're also working with memory in a way in Feldenkrais lessons too, aren't we? But not necessarily explicit memories.
Mm-hmm.
But they're memories that are held in the brain and the nervous system related to movement, one's sense of self, the self-image, as you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
We're working with that all the time.
Well, all those memories that we have before the hippocampus is developed, before we can think of the past and the future, which is around usually 2.5 or 3, a lot goes on. And, I have 2 grandbabies that are 2 weeks apart. The one will soon be 8 months, 7.5 months old. And I'm observing them have a ton of experiences. And they're both very beautifully taken care of. They have loving parents. I'm around a lot. All the people in their lives that are helpers are fabulous. So they still cry. They still bump their heads. They still go down for a nap and they cry sometimes for 10 or 15 minutes. And then they play around and they go to sleep. I believe they're having a very comfortable infancy. Now, we don't know for sure. See, there's a lot of stuff about infancy and implicit memory that I think we're kind of uncertain about. People talk about it like they really know for sure. And I think that's a mistake sometimes, frankly, because babies are very resilient. They're incredibly resilient. And for example, if you leave them down or you routinely put them in their crib to go to sleep for a nap and they cry for a little while and they roll around finally and they go to sleep within a half an hour, unless they're crying really hard and they're distressed, it's a different kind of cry. It may be beneficial that they're learning how to be alone and to be self-soothing. So these questions come up constantly for parents. It's like, what's good for my child? What if they know about implicit memories? They wonder, what is this baby, this child that I have going to feel like when he or she grows up?
Yeah, well, giving a loving and secure environment is really important. And like you say, babies are very resilient. They're learning so fast. Their brain cells are just growing. All these neural connections are being made as they so quickly develop. And they learn to move and crawl and sense and feel and think and interact with their parents and the caregivers. And given just a generally positive environment, I think babies are going to do okay. And it's like we can't control every aspect of a child's development. They are who they are. And it's very interesting how different babies are too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. This experience of having 2 babies 2 weeks apart is, it's phenomenal. I have a couple of my own kids, obviously. They're the ones that have the babies, but they were 3 years apart. And so I wasn't able to see them side by side developing. So this baby boy and baby girl, I spend a day with one and then I go to the other one for the day. And the way they learned to roll over was vastly different. One, he was on his belly and he tilted his head to the side and the weight of his head flipped him over. And she lifted her leg up and threw it over and flipped herself over. So completely different ways of rolling. It's fascinating to watch.
That is so cool. It sounds like an awareness through movement lesson.
Completely. Every time I'm with them, I see them doing fast awareness through movement lessons. I was just with the little boy, and he's the one that he'll 8 months nearly, and he climbs up on the edge of the sofa or whatever he can get his hands on and stands up and then falls back on his butt at least 100 times a day right now. I'm not kidding. Up and down and up and down. And just yesterday I was watching him and he's starting to bend his knees now to squat instead of just falling back on his butt. So he's doing all those lessons that we're familiar with that have to do with squatting and lifting the heel and turning the foot over. He stands on top of his foot. He stands on the heels. He stands on his toes. All the variations that we include in those lessons that we think about. Sometimes we talk about them as learning how to sit on your heels, which he does also, just sits on his heels. So goes from hands and knees to sitting back on his heels and up and back and rocking on the hands and the knees. And so, yeah, very, very, very quick. And I'm familiar with the fact that Dr. Feldenkrais spent a lot of time around babies, and his wife was a pediatrician. So he watched babies a lot. He didn't have any of his own, but he loved babies and loved to observe them. And you can see the lessons that we do that are developmentally oriented by watching babies develop.
Yeah, that's really one of the key elements of the work that we do is we're kind of working with those developmental learnings and helping people to reintegrate them, repattern those early learnings. A lot of the Feldenkrais training starts out with early developmental movements. So when we're trained as practitioners, we're kind of going through in a way, I kind of look at it like this, we're going through our history, our personal developmental history, and we're kind of updating it. We're completing it in ways that maybe we didn't so clearly do when we were developing, because development's pretty haphazard.
It's very haphazard, especially when parents don't understand how movement develops. I've worked with several babies, burgeoning toddlers who have been put in the sitting position. And they're propped up with pillows, and then they're put in the sitting position, and they don't know how to get out of the sitting position. They're stuck. And they become relatively rigid, actually. And when you start to tilt them to fall over, to catch themselves, they get really scared and they tighten up more. So as a Feldenkrais practitioner, I turn them, put them in a side sitting situation. So one leg is in front and one is bent back, so they can twist and put their hands on the floor. And so I turn and put the hands on the floor so they start to realize that they can get out of sitting. Otherwise, they just fall back and bump their heads or fall over. It takes them longer, actually, to learn how to crawl.
Let's just back up a little bit. So is this a thing that parents are doing, is putting children in a seated position before they're developmentally ready to be in a seated position?
Very frequently, and they're put in a lot of different types of support chairs. So they sit and they play with their hands and they learn to manipulate objects, but they're not rolling around on the floor and they don't know how to fall over safely.
Wow.
And I can see in them that they are afraid. They don't have the confidence to move around on the floor. If you look at babies that have not been put in the seated position, instead they're held, or they're just put on their back or their stomach, or they're rolling around, they have confidence to fall over, roll around, and get up, or to lean on their elbow and play with one hand.
Yeah, well, it's just like good intentions gone awry.
Yes, and when I speak to parents about this, they say things like, but he likes it. And I go, well, that's really nice. He likes playing with his hands, but he'll get to that. If you keep him on the floor, and in fact, lie on the floor and roll around with them, they'll have much more confidence.
Yeah, so this whole thing of being able to fall back, roll over, all these really important skills we develop early in life lead to confidence and competence later in life, don't they?
They really do. And I believe when you take a child like that who's been able to fall over and get up hundreds of times, literally, I'm not exaggerating, which is kind of mind-blowing to watch this little tiny thing get up and down, fall down hundreds of times a day. But he has so much confidence because then he rolls over and he gets up. And if he's startled, he looks at me or his parents and we just say, you're fine. I'm right here with you. And he just keeps on going. He seldom cries when he falls. So his confidence is amazing and it's going to stay with him the rest of his life. There's no doubt about it.
He's really laying down some really powerful implicit memories that are going to lay a foundation of confidence, competence in him and as an adult and living in the world. Yeah, it's really profound to see that in that early developmental stage. And you have that perspective now in life where you can see where that's going. You can see how that's going to lead into different skill sets that we don't know what they would be yet, of course, but it's going to happen as he matures into his teen years and adult years.
Yeah, and I've seen literally hundreds of people. Maybe I think we're probably in the thousands, really, of training programs that I've taught over the years or intensive workshops with people that have learned how to balance and squat and get up and do something that looks like Russian dancing. And we have so many amazing lessons that really bring people along in an easy way that they don't feel intimidated by the movements. And then they're surprised by what they can do. And when adults have that experience, they too grow in confidence. And they often say, oh my gosh, if I can do that now, what else am I not doing that I could actually be doing? They transfer that learning to their lives and they start to wonder.
I see that a lot in my clients and people who take my classes. I work with a lot of older adults, a lot of people in 65 up age range. And so these are people who, when they have those kinds of experiences, it's really profound for them. And I hear a lot about that this time of year because it's spring here in Colorado. So people are starting to go out and turn the soil and plant their gardens and things like that. And I had one of my clients come in the other day and she said, I've been doing my garden, but, I've been doing it slowly and gently and not overdoing it. But I've really made a lot of progress and it's fun and I feel good when I'm done. And that's a beautiful thing that comes out of this work. Even this person's in her 80s.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it is fantastic. It's fantastic to see that people have that confidence and that ability to really enjoy life at any age. Whether you're 8 months and you're popping up and down off the floor, or if you're 80 and you're getting up and down from the ground working with your garden.
As you say that, it reminds me of how memory changes, because sometimes people will have an experience like that, getting up and getting down, and adults. And then they get up, they walk around, and they'll say something like, but I have a really hard time gardening. And so they're bringing the memory of the difficulty of gardening back into the moment when they're feeling fantastic and they just got up from the floor easily. And so sometimes I'll say, well, how about right now? What are you experiencing right now? And they'll say, well, I feel really good right now. Well, then when you go to garden, when will that be? Oh, this afternoon. Okay, well, remember this, how easy it was right now to get up and down and bring it to gardening. Now, oftentimes these things happen immediately for people. They just transfer. But I think it's okay sometimes to suggest that they imagine it when they go to do their activity, especially when they've made a reference for past difficulty.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just helping to imagine going into the future and have that experience now. So you feel really good now. How's it going to feel when you're in the garden and you get down, you start gardening, and you have this feeling while you're gardening? What's that like? How does it feel to be gardening in this state? And they can usually put themselves in that situation and have that experience. And that's creating a new memory for them. It's like it's not happened yet, but it's going to happen. And when they get there, they've already had the experience of having a good feeling and feeling well when they're gardening, so that when they go out to their garden, they're much more apt to be able to go into that state and feel good when they're doing it.
Yeah, so this way of manipulating ourselves. I mean, it's kind of phenomenal. Manipulation is a weird word for some people, but in fact, I think that's what we're learning how to do. We're
Yeah.
manipulating how our mind works through attention, how we're using our attention.
Yeah. And we learn that in these Feldenkrais lessons. We learn how to move our attention, how to formulate an intention to organize our movement, how our orientation affects our organization. All of these things are things we learn implicitly and explicitly when we're doing Feldenkrais lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Things we can really start to learn to do with intention to help us create the kind of life and kind of life experiences we want to have.
That's right. And so we get to have everything to do with our life experience when we understand this. You know, even I mean, the Dalai Lama talks about happiness for that matter. And he recommends that people learn and understand that the way they discipline their mind creates happiness for them in daily life. And he, of course, says, you know, there's a lot of suffering in life. It's not that you're pretending that there's not suffering, but you're using your mind, your attention, to sort for feeling well. And, you know, he adds to that we need purpose in life. We need to self-reflect, become aware of what we're doing, which is also Feldenkrais's idea, and then become clear about how we want to contribute to the lives of others. What if every day you woke up and you said, I want to do something for someone else today that will add a little happiness or goodness to their lives? That's a sense of purpose. And it's using your intention to do that. And it makes you feel good, and it makes somebody else feel good.
Yeah. If you do that, you're spreading feelings of goodness around, and that comes back to you, and that spreads further out. Maybe that person you did something nice for will do something nice for somebody else. Mm-hmm. Whether it's just making a kind gesture at a clerk in a store, or fixing your spouse some breakfast, or waving to a neighbor. You know, all kinds of small gestures of kindness that we can spread out through the world. And those reflect back to us. When we do that, we're creating that kindness in ourselves.
As you're saying that, I'm reflecting on how important that is. Like you said, it can be saying hello to your neighbor, or giving them a helping hand, or bringing their mail in when they're away for a week, you know. It's like being available to people, taking someone who is not feeling well chicken soup if they like chicken soup. All of these kinds of things, they're kind gestures, like you said. And that act, the activity, changes your self-image. It makes you feel connected to other people. And that's another aspect of being happy and feeling content in life, is having connections with others. Dr. Seligman was one of the first people that began to study positive psychology, and he wrote a book called Flourishing. And he includes that in the, the steps of becoming a happy person, or to flourish in life. And that's being self-aware, self-reflecting, being connected to others, and having purpose.
You know, and we do that when we're doing awareness through movement lessons and functional integration lessons. But I think especially awareness through movement, when we're being guided through a lesson to sense ourselves, it's really, and I emphasize this with my clients in my classes, about how this is a way to learn to take care of yourself, to be kind to yourself, to feel what feels good, and to have more of that in your life. And that's a really important underlying theme, I believe, in these lessons. Mm-hmm. That we continue to help people learn to feel those things and move away from what hurts, what's unpleasant, and help them move towards what feels really good, and how to take care of themselves, know what's enough, and really get more out of joy, out of life. Mm-hmm. Until they end up doing that.
So those of you that are listening, if you're in the mood, if you feel like it, take a moment and notice your breathing. Sense your exhalation and extend it a little bit. So you breathe out and then breathe out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until you can't breathe out anymore. And then sense the easy breath that follows your exhalation and repeat that a couple of times. And when you breathe out, notice how your chest compresses a little bit. You may pull your belly in a little bit to really push the air out to exhale fully. So go with that, even if you use some effort. We always say do everything effortlessly, but this time use a little effort and breathe out all the way. And then sense the effortless inhalation. Continue with that and then notice the length of your spine. Reduce the effort in your face, your jaw. Think of your head and your neck. So everything is letting go, finding comfort, a little more stillness in yourself. And imagine for a moment what you'd like to do for someone else today or tomorrow. Does someone come to mind that you would like to send a text to, drop a card in the mail, actually use snail mail, deliver something to a friend or a neighbor? What would you like to do today or tomorrow that would make somebody else feel good? So that's up to you. And as you think about that and sense yourself and feel yourself imagining that act of kindness, notice the details. And maybe you'll take the time to send us a note and let us know what that was like for you. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate your comments on feldenkreisforlife.com.
Yeah, thank you all.
If you'd like more information, you know how to reach us.
Bye.
Bye.